All right. Welcome to the stream, everybody. It's good to be back. I was looking at YouTube and it looks like my last stream was maybe 7 months ago. It seems crazy, but thank you for joining me here. What I'm going to be doing in this stream is I've got a post-it note here and I'm going to be doing some artwork on it. So I'm going to be doing some fan art of a game called Streets of Rage from back in the early 90s, back on the Sega Genesis. So it was a game that I really got started on and played a lot in my youth. It was something that I really enjoyed. I would play a lot with my dad. And by the way, let me know if there's anything that's wonky with the visual setup or the audio that's going on. It's been a long time, like I said, since I've streamed. And now I saw on that there's a different version of OBS that I'm using, which is the broadcasting software that I'm actually using to stream to you. So things are a little bit different there. So I just want to make sure that everything is working for everybody. Definitely let me know if there's anything that's going on that seems a little bit weird. So yeah, as I said, I'll be doing a little bit of post-it note artwork. I'm hoping to finish this piece. And I don't know if you can see, it's very light. I completed the pencils already on this. So this is all done with a blue pencil. I don't remember what the name of the type of pencil was. But I would kind of did all of my pencils and sort of my rough figuring things out already. Because at this point, I'm not, Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane or one of these guys who could pencil and talk at the same time. I think that I can ink and color with markers while I talk, though. I don't have any issues painting while I talk. So that's kind of just what I've done here. And I've started doing some of the ink work while you were seeing that stream starting now screen, just to make sure that I could kind of get a little bit ahead of the ball and kind of make sure that we get everything finished here. So this character is a character called Axel, who's one of the main characters of the Streets of Rage franchise. The Streets of Rage games were, as I said, back from the early 90s. They came out on the Sega Genesis originally, and originally I believe the series was called Bare Knuckle when it came out in Japan. So that was the Japanese title of the game. And I will just continue on inking here. And what I'm doing right now is, so fast forward a couple of years from the early 90s to, I think it was 2020, if I'm not mistaken, they came out with a new version of Streets of Rage. They came out with a fourth game. There were 3 games that came out for the Sega Genesis, and then a fourth was released not really that long ago. And that one was sort of a new installment in the series. It was kind of a sequel, but also did a lot of things to sort of reimagine the series as well. So I'm doing Axel as he appears inside of that game. He's got a kind of a scruffy beard and mustache, kind of looks like a world-weary guy. The premise of these games was that you played as basically ex-police officers, and what was happening is the city that these people lived in was kind of overtaken by this evil syndicate, kind of like a criminal overlord organization that takes over everything, like all the way down to the police force, and it becomes extremely corrupt. And these police officers that you're playing as, or former police officers as it happens to be, are kind of on their own, sort of cleaning up the streets, fighting off of these thugs and everything like that. And it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up, so the screen is sort of static, and you can move up and down, left and right, as you fight off these sort of waves of, like I said, just sort of different thugs and then bosses eventually that kind of appear on screen. And this is one of the main characters of the series. I think I mentioned my dad and I would often play together when he would get home from work. We would always play together, and he never seemed to get tired of the fact that I would always request to play it, even though we had played through it 40, 50 times probably. It seemed like we played it a lot, but I enjoyed the heck out of it every time. There's a lot of really fond memories from that. So right now I'm just in the inking phase. So I'm firming up all of the lines that I've made in sort of that penciling phase for the initial piece. And I'm kind of going back and forth between the streaming software and the YouTube feed. So if you do have any questions about what I'm doing or materials that I'm using, please feel free to just sort of drop that in the chat. If you just want to talk about, you know, if you played Streets of Rage and you've got fond memories about it, or if you have any questions, like I said, you just want to hang out, chat about whatever, feel free to just drop that in the chat. This is the first time that I'm inking while I'm trying to talk too. This is kind of an interesting challenge. I like it though. It's good stuff. Streets of Rage kind of holds a special place in my heart just because as I've gotten older and sort of my tastes in different things have sort of, I don't know, firmed up a little bit, I've found that the Streets of Rage games themselves have really, they've really sort of wormed their way into a lot of my influences, I'd say. So I was very interested in the soundtrack for the game. And if you've ever played it, you probably know why that is, and you probably feel much the same way, honestly. It has a very famous soundtrack that was created primarily by a Japanese composer by the name of Yuzo Koshiro, who was very heavily inspired by a lot of the like club and techno music of the 90s. And he really did a lot of, frankly, pretty incredible things with the Genesis sound chip, the Sega Genesis, the console that it came out on. It was really sort of a unique sounding soundtrack that incorporated a lot of sort of, like I said, the modern techno elements of the day and really kind of created some sophisticated sounds and songs on it that really nobody else was doing at that point, if we're being honest. At this point, if you're curious, the tool that I'm using here, this is called a Tombow Fudenosuke. I do not get points for knowing how that's pronounced. I apologize. But this kind of is a unique tool that I really like. I don't know if you can see this super clearly on the camera, but this is a sort of a soft rubber tip, kind of. So it's like halfway in between like a brush pen, which I can show you what that looks like. Let me grab mine up here. That's this guy. So this is actually literally like a pen with a cartridge inside, but it's a brush tip. This Tombow that I'm using is halfway in between that brush pen and kind of like a felt tip pen that you might see or use. I like it because it gives good variety in terms of the line width. So if you push harder, the line becomes thicker. If you push lighter, you can get some really thin, fine lines out of it. And what I'm going to be doing now is switching over to this Micron. So a Pigma Micron is basically like a technical pen or a felt tip pen. You see the tip of that is pretty fine, and it's more used for exacting lines. So what I'll do is I'll go in here and some of the things that I'd like to be finer lines, I'll come in and do with that. So this area down at the bottom here, I'll talk a little bit about the sort of the outfit that he's wearing in this costume that I'm drawing. So he's got kind of like a blue jacket over the top of things. And then he's got kind of like a white undershirt. That's what this line is going to represent here. And because it's the 90s and because it was very amped up and action-packed, he's pretty built. I mean, he's kind of just like a brick that's walking around, as would fit for the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre. And then what I'm going to do is come in here and I'll do some work on a glove. So this is kind of his fist coming up in front of the camera. And the character of Axel, like his special move was like his fist would like ignite on fire and he would be beating up the bad guys and everything. So I'm going to be including that feature as well. So he kind of has these knuckle gloves that sort of stop halfway down his fingers. put these little like studs on the gloves. And then his fist is going to wrap around like this. He's got index finger, middle finger. Draw a little bit of the knuckleature to kind of suggest the fact that that's sort of wrapping around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit more ink detail on the hair, and then I'm going to just go straight in for some coloration on it. I did mention that his fist kind of has this flame effect, so I'll throw in a little bit of line work just to kind of suggest where the flames might be coming out. Like that. So this area will be slightly different in terms of the color to suggest that fire. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump the mic there. And then, like I said, we'll just go in, kind of throw in some black areas of the hair to kind of suggest where there might be some shadows in here. Axel was always depicted as having blonde hair, so I'll kind of try to suggest that in the color scheme here. And then I'll probably use the Micron for a little bit of the texturing inside of his eyebrows and also the mustache and beard. So his hairs are going to be a little bit more fine and a little bit less chunky and defined like they would be up here. I'm going a little bit fast just because I'm probably only going to be streaming for 30 or 40 minutes today, and I really would like to get this finished for you guys. Kind of define the cheekbones a little bit. Like I said, in the fourth game, he kind of has this sort of world-weary look that I kind of want to capture, so I'm putting in a little bit of wrinkles around his eyes. Just to kind of try to capture that a little bit as well. I'll define that a little bit. And then we can start going in with alcohol markers. So what I'm using are Ohuhu alcohol markers. This is a brand that seems to be becoming a little bit more popular with some artists just because the main sort of, I don't know, Rolls-Royce, the gold standard for alcohol markers, is a brand called Copic. Copic markers are extremely expensive, however, and at this point, I don't have the budget for Copic markers. And Ohuhu markers are kind of sort of that entry level of marker, and I found them to be very good. There's a lot of alcohol markers that are out there on the market. A lot of ones that are kind of trying to capitalize on the less expensive end of the spectrum, sort of to be a budget alcohol marker. But I've consistently had good results with Ohuhu markers. I've been happy with them. I've heard a lot of other people be happy with them as well. So that's really kind of what led me to use those. If you're not familiar with alcohol markers, they are very similar in many respects to like the Crayola markers that you might be using, might have used in like kindergarten or something like that. The main difference is that the ink is alcohol-based instead of water-based. And the primary advantage with alcohol-based markers is, and you'll see this as I start to work a little bit more, the alcohol base, and I'm not going to claim to understand all of the chemistry and what all is happening here, but the markers themselves blend, like the inks and the colors blend together much more easily than they would with water-based markers. Like I said, I don't claim to understand all of the ins and outs of why that is the way that it is. I just know that it is, and it works. And it really produces some cool results. You can get some really fine gradations in like terms of shading. You can go from dark colors to light colors, and as you're putting down more and more, you can kind of blend them together, and it really produces an interesting effect. I think that it's nice, especially compared to like colored pencils. The one thing that has always frustrated me about colored pencils is the fact that a lot of times you start drawing with the colored pencils and you get little spots of white or little spots of the paper that appear just because the paper itself has tooth. It has nooks and crannies in it, and the pigment of the colored pencil doesn't make it into all of those nooks and crannies. And to me, that was always something that was very frustrating because it just never produced that really clean, vibrant look that I was looking for. And part of that might just be the colored pencils that I'm using. I know that as you start to use better and better colored pencils, higher and higher quality, they include more and more pigment, which kind of counteracts that problem, which is a good thing. But I've always struggled with them because of that. I'm going to go in with a slightly darker color. Ohuhu does this pretty cool thing where I bought a 60 color marker set from them, and they included this little page at the beginning. And what that allows you to do is color in each one of these boxes. So each marker has a number. This one is 25. I don't know if you can see that. So that's equal to sample. Let's see if we can get that back. All right, I think we're back. If you can let me know in the chat if we're back. Sorry, technical difficulties are sort of a mainstay of doing some live stuff. I think my internet connection just dropped out for a second, which was really weird. While you were gone, I didn't really do a whole lot. I just sort of went in and put in a little bit more of this darker color. And then what I'm doing is I'm going back with 26. That was the first marker that I used. And I'm just going to pull this darker area into the lighter area. Let me just see, is that somebody saying? Okay, cool. Looks like we're back up. Apologies for that. But like I said, technical issues, they're just sort of a mainstay of live streaming, it seems like, no matter what you do. All right. I'll just attempt to pull this darker color. And this is one of the benefits, like I was mentioning. I hope that this came through it before, but this is one of the benefits of using alcohol markers, is that you can kind of go in after the fact and blend them together a little bit. So use this darker color again here. I'll put a little bit on the lips to kind of suggest a little bit of shade. And then also on these knuckles to kind of give a little bit of shade there as well. Kind of show a little bit of shadow color. And then what I will do is kind of soften these edges by going back to 26, which is the lighter color. And let me know if I start to wander with the post-it note at any point and kind of start to drop out of your field of vision. Because that's not my intention. I don't intend to do that. So this is looking pretty good at this point. I'll get a little bit on the underside of his nose. And this area back here also needs to be a little bit darker. Follow the jawline around with the darker color. And I'm just thinking about where the shadow shapes will lie with this. So this is kind of a muscle that runs along the neck, which is going to be really pronounced because he's, you know, a 90. How are we doing out there? Are we back on? I think we're back on. Let me know how we're doing, okay? If you can, just drop something in the chat or something. Again, I apologize for the technical issues. It just seems like no matter what you do, every now and then the computers just decide to mess with us a little bit. It looks like we're back up. I hope so. So this is kind of a blue denim sort of overshirt that he's wearing, kind of like an open jacket that he has inside of that costume. So I put a slightly darker shade of blue as sort of an outline, as a shadow color. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit lighter shade of blue and kind of blend that darker color out as we come out. And then this whole piece here is going to be facing this flaming fist area here. So I think what I'm going to do is just color that whole area in with the lighter color. And I might come in and sort of tweak that a little bit later on, but we'll see. That's good for now, I think. I'm going to use the darker color on this tiny little sliver of his sort of like back shoulder area here and underneath there. And then over here again, what I'm going to do is use that lighter color. So this is also the other side of that collar that he's wearing. Kind of skirt around this little bit of fire there. And if I'm not mistaken, his headband is also blue. I don't have a reference image in front of me, which is probably not the smartest thing to do, but it's something that I do often. So if you're not going to do something smart, at least be persistent in it. That's what I always say. Not really. It's not very good advice. Don't try this at home, but that's all right. We'll just go for it. As I was saying, I don't know if it actually ended up in the stream because of all of the starts and stops that we've had, but I really like these alcohol markers because I don't know if it's coming through really well in this image that I'm getting through the webcam, but like the color and the vibrancy that you get, it just has this sort of feeling of being alive almost in a way that a lot of other media don't. And I really like that. It really just has this, like I said, it's just a feeling that kind of comes to it that I don't feel like I get from a lot of other media. Something that I've been experimenting with a little bit more. All right, what are we going to do now? I think the hair is the next thing to do. So he's got blonde hair. It's kind of yellowish because this is the 16-bit era, so all of the colors were very bright. It was the early 90s, so it was very bright, very vibrant. So I'm going to go with a little bit more strict yellow here, which might not look the most realistic, but I think is going to kind of capture what the character looks like the best and kind of give that feel. So I've got 3 different shades of yellow here in this 60 marker set, plus fluorescent. I'm not going to use fluorescent. And I'm also going to take advantage of the fact that this is a yellow Post-it note that I'm on right now. And actually, I should probably say a word about the Post-it note art because that's kind of something that's weird. I first saw an artist named Todd Knock do Post-it note art. He probably wasn't the first person in the world who ever did Post-it note art, but he was certainly the first person that I saw. I don't know if there were other people that did it before him. I apologize to people if I'm totally butchering the chronology, but he's certainly the person that I saw do it. He's an artist that worked for Marvel and DC and a lot of the other comic book places. And I thought that post-it note idea was just so cool, because the post-it note is something that's very, I don't want to say throwaway, but it's not ultra high quality artist paper. It's not something that's super duper fancy. It's very, you just have them laying around your house. And it's cool because there are different colors of post-it notes. They have yellow ones, which are probably the classic, like what I'm using here. But they also have blue, they've got pink, they've got purple, I think. They've got all different colors. And the way that you kind of color on those, it creates unique effects. So like you notice in a spot like this, where I don't have as much vibrant marker color, a little bit of that yellow kind of shows through. And if I were using white paper, that wouldn't look right. It would look weird if I were to do that. But because this isn't stark white paper, that yellow kind of bleeds through in a lot of different spots and really creates some interesting color effects. And especially like, I saw him at one point, he did a Hulk on a green post-it note. And the way that the green of the post-it note and the green of the markers and watercolors and whatever else he was using played with each other really looked quite cool. You had a lot of kind of harmony between those two things, and there's a little bit of interplay between those that I thought was just really cool. I'm going in with a slightly darker color of yellow here to kind of put in some shadow shapes. The other thing that I really like about the post-it note art idea is that a post-it note, if you didn't know, which you probably wouldn't because this isn't something that's useful to know at all, is a post-it note is 3 inches by 3 inches. So it's like perfectly square right off the bat. It's large enough that you can make a piece of art without, having to scrunch things together and really make things sort of unpleasant for yourself as an artist. But it's also not so big that the art takes tons and tons of time to complete. And it's kind of a fun spot to experiment, I've found. You can kind of do different things that you might not do on a more expensive paper or something that's a little bit larger, something that you really want to kind of make be a portfolio piece. You might not be willing to experiment on it, but I mean, I've got tons of post-it notes just laying around the home office. I mean, I've got no problem experimenting on this. That's, it's kind of part of the fun for me that I just get to kind of try a couple different things. Maybe I try a different medium. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, alcohol markers were never something that I really did anything with. I mean, I had a set that I received as a gift for Christmas at one point, but I mean, this was never something that I was trained in or practiced or anything like that. And it was really nice. Whoops. I'm going to go back in with the lightest color of yellow just to kind of blend things together in here. But yeah, it was never something that I really trained with, but doing things on this post-it note really did kind of give that opportunity for just sort of trial and error and doing something new. And it's exciting in that respect. It's a nice little thing to just sort of try, and you can make, like this, characters that you really like and enjoy. It's pretty simple and straightforward, easy to do. And you don't have to worry about some big extensive piece of art that you're making. It's really kind of nice in that respect. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with where the hair and everything is. I'm going to go in and put in a little bit of darker color on this headband to kind of give it a little bit more body and a little bit more shape. So I'm going to add a little bit of darker color up towards the top. So I'm envisioning this flame being sort of the source of light for this. So pieces that are kind of on the opposite sides of these strands of hair, that hair is going to cast a shadow. Up at the top is kind of going to have a little bit of a shadow, and way over on this side there's going to be probably the darkest shadow that we'll see. So I'm going to go in and with that lighter shade of blue and pull some of this darker color out so that the colors mix and we get a little bit more of a gradation rather than just two separate colors. If I'm being perfectly honest, I kind of like the way that separate colors look. It kind of gives like a, I think they call that cell shading, kind of gives that sort of appearance, which is also pretty cool. It's not exactly the look that I'm going for right here. Cool nonetheless. All right. So what I'm going to do is grab a shade of gray so that I can do this sort of undershirt. In the costume in the game, this is a white undershirt. So I'm going to use probably a couple different shades of gray. I'm going to try warm gray 1. With alcohol markers, there are two different sort of classes of gray. So there's cool grays and warm grays. The name is really exactly what you would think. So warm grays are going to be kind of a little bit of a warmer tinge to them. So a little bit more orangish red underneath that gray. Cool grays are going to be the opposite, a little bit more green, a little bit more blue-ish. So this is a warm gray right here that I'm putting down. And it might not come through perfectly on the stream, and especially because it's going on over yellow Post-it note, that's going to appear a little bit more yellow. That might even be a little bit darker than I intended, but we'll see as it dries, it might kind of mellow out a little bit. Hopefully that's the case. And then I have these little studs that I've drawn on his knuckle gloves so that he's got some extra punching power for, you know, beating the bad guys and everything. I'm going to go in with the gray on those too. It'll kind of maybe suggest a little bit of like a metallic feeling to them. All right. And now comes kind of the fun part. We're going to do a little bit of work on the glove and this flame over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a color of yellow, probably an orange, and then a red. And those are kind of going to constitute the flame colors that I have. So I've got, let's see, I've got 22 over here, which is French vermilion. I've got 10, which is deep red. And I'm going to use 45, which is Canaria yellow, which is this lighter color of yellow that I was using before. And I might even pull in a second shade of red. So these gloves are actually red in the character's costume. So I'll go in and just kind of lay in a base color. This is even maybe a little bit darker than I intend for it to be, but that's okay. And if you're joining, I'm doing some Post-it note art. So this is art that's being entirely done on a Post-it note. It's a yellow 3x3 Post-it. And the character that I'm doing is called Axel from a video game series called Streets of Rage, which was a video game series that came out for the Sega Genesis back in the early 90s originally. I really got to say, I'm using 22, which is French vermilion right now, which is kind of a fun name for a color, which is kind of an orangish red. And I see that this is coming out a little bit more red than I had intended, actually, so I'm going to have to be a little bit ginger with my application of it. If you guys have any questions or anything you want to chat about or anything, definitely feel free to drop those in the chat. I've been trying to talk about the materials that I've been using. These are Ohuhu alcohol markers that I'm using, and I have the 60 marker set that I'm using for this video. One thing that I'll say about the 60 marker set that I have, I wish that there were more lighter shades of orange and red. I feel like a lot of the oranges and reds have a tendency to be very punchy. Like this is just like, boom, red. I wish that there were more like softer reds, softer oranges. I think that would kind of help with a lot of the stuff that I try to do with it. All right, that'll be good enough. All right, so what I'm going to do is go and grab a darker shade of red so that I can do a little bit of shading here. What is this one called? Geranium. Gotta love the different colors that names for colors that they come up with. Geranium and cerulean. This will just be a little bit of shading on this dark red of the glove to kind of give it some feeling of dimension. And then I will go in with a little bit of French vermilion, which is the orange color. And I'll shade that. Try to pull that darker color in to the lighter color and kind of get a nice little gradient. We'll see how that goes. Now, and this kind of ties in with what I was saying with not having as many light reds or oranges. What I want to do is kind of get a little bit of a feeling of a glow on his face from this flaming fist that he's got. The way that I'm going to try to do this, and I don't know if this is going to work. I've never tried this before, so we're learning together. Isn't it exciting? I've got a slightly more like a pink color, and what I'm going to try to do is apply that to his face in a spot to see if we can kind of get a little bit of a glowing effect. If this doesn't work, I have a plan B. So I'm just putting a very thin line and then trying to pull it out with a little bit of the light skin tone that I have. We'll see if it works. In the meantime, I can put a little bit of it over here. And a little bit of it right here as well. I don't remember what the name of that muscle is, but that'll kind of add a little bit of a highlight to that. And I'm going to try to blend in this a little bit so that it appears like it's a little bit more of a just a glowing effect on there rather than solid pink. Like he got a stain or something on his shirt. And as this is drying, I'm kind of observing it, and it's not exactly giving me the look that I wanted, which I was a little bit afraid of, but I was aware that that might happen. So what I've got is just a colored pencil. This is tomato red. And what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll just use that colored pencil on a couple of these spots to kind of give the impression very lightly that there is sort of that red glow on these places. This along the nose doesn't look too bad, but it wasn't exactly what I was going for. As this is drying, you know, I'm actually kind of okay with this. That was not as bad as I was fearing that it would be initially. All right. So that's something. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with where we are right now. So what I'm going to do is move to finish this really quick. I'm going to have to jump here pretty soon, but I want to make sure that I finish this. I'm going to add a little bit of dark for his pupils here. Just like that. That looks pretty good. And then my favorite part of using alcohol markers is the grays, honestly. I really like the way that grays appear. So as I mentioned, we've got a couple of different families of gray markers, cool grays, warm grays. I'm going to be going in with some blue grays. So in the cool family, they have also blue grays and green grays. It's kind of confusing, but there's just different options, different things that you can do. So I'm using blue grays with the blue of the jacket that he has. And this is just basically, I'm kind of bringing this in to darken it up a little bit in spots. So like these shadow areas, I want to kind of pop a little bit in terms of shadows. I'll go in with my lighter blue color and try to pull these out a little bit so we get a little bit of a finer gradation, just like before. And over here as well. Put a little bit of that in the headband. And it's really, at this point, just about kind of giving the eye more visual information to kind of play with. The more shadows that you can identify, planes that you can put into place, the more the viewer's eye is going to kind of dance around the image and fill in little details here and there, which I think is kind of a neat little thing. And then let's see, what do we want to do for the background? I'm thinking going a pretty simple background just because I'm a little bit short on time here. So what I'll be doing is going with a warm gray 8, which is a very dark color. But I think that that'll kind of have things pop a little bit. And what I'm going to do is just go around. You can probably see on the video, this is pretty much looking like black. But the nice thing about it being a gray color is that it isn't quite black. So if I were to put black next to it, or I have the black of the ink lines next to it, it's still going to kind of have a little bit of a different appearance to it, which I think is kind of neat. And like I said, it kind of gives the viewer a little bit more visual information to kind of piece things together and gives their mind a little bit more, or their eye rather, a little bit more to play with. So at this point, I've kind of done an outline around him. I'm just going to color in. And I'll work on an outline over on this side. And I think that because a lot of these blues and yellows are so bright, having a really dark contrasting background will really add a lot to it and kind of bring the character into the fore and really kind of make everything sort of leap off the page a little bit more. That's what I'm hoping, at least. Yeah, being a 90s kid, the Streets of Rage games really had sort of a 90s flair that I really enjoyed. And like I said, really feel like it kind of influenced me in a lot of things, how I think about things visually, my taste in music even, because as I mentioned, they had the composer that was excellent and then brought in another composer that was excellent for the subsequent games. All right. So this dark color is pretty well laid in the background here. I'm just going to go over this in a different direction because I noticed that there were some streaks in the shade here, which I thought was interesting. Normally with alcohol markers you don't get that, but interesting to note. All right, so we've got a dark background here. We've got a little bit here. I'm just going to kind of fill in this area with a little bit of yellow to kind of try to draw things together a little bit more so that, again, you don't have quite so stark of edges going on right here. There'll probably be a couple of lines that I will clean up here and there, but we're nearing the end. I'm going back with my Tombow felt tip piece here. Adding in a little bit of black. And then finally the last step is going to be this Jelly Roll white gel pen. So I believe these are made by Sakura. These are quite possibly the best things that I've ever found for doing white lines, honestly. The white is very solid, creates a very distinct color. And what I'm going to do is, because these Post-it note pieces for me are more illustrations that just kind of stand alone, what I will do is just go around the outline and give him a nice defining white outline. I think that this just helps to kind of add a little bit of extra punch to the illustration. So go around there, like that. And we are nearing the end of this stream, so if you do have any last second questions or anything that you want to, if you want to suggest something for a future stream, I do hope to be doing them more often. Like I said, I looked at YouTube and it looked like it had been, man, like 7 months since I streamed last. I definitely want to do them more often than that, because it is really genuinely something that I enjoy. If you'd like to see more of these Post-it note pieces of art, definitely let me know. And along with that, feel free to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I post a lot of artwork. JStan Studio in both places. JSTAN Studio. And if you haven't already, feel free to like this stream if you like what you've seen. If you've liked what you've seen in between all of the technical difficulties that I had. Come around and do a little bit of white line work on the outline of the flame. Kind of tie these things together a little bit. Maybe get a little bit down on this side as well. Just to kind of tie everything together there. I like to put a little bit of a white dot on the eyes as well to kind of give the impression that there's a little bit of glossiness on the eyeball, which is always good. A little bit of a dab on the lip, not too much, because it's not like he's wearing lip gloss as he's out there beating up thugs and stuff like that. And at this point, my main concern is just over-rendering. I don't want to noodle this thing to death. This little bit of white also helps to kind of sell that feeling of glowingness as well. And just like that, I think I'm going to have to call this quits before I noodle this to death. Maybe a little bit over here. A couple little lines here and there to kind of break up some of this orange block. And at this point, I think largely what I would do is maybe go in and just selectively add a couple more little black lines here and there. But other than that, I think we're about set. I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out. So what I'm going to do is just sign this off in the corner. A lot of times for the Post-it notes that I've done, I just sign it with a J and the year. And call it good. Thanks a lot for joining me here. Appreciate you joining me. Appreciate everybody kind of sticking through even when there were a little bit of technical issues, kind of starting and stopping the stream here and there. I look to be doing more, and I really hope that you appreciate it, that you enjoy it. And yeah, on to the next. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night.